Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a really fascinating piece of source material titled Architectures of Intelligence and Action Planning. So, if you've ever wanted to, optimize how you learn, how you work, or just how you interact with the world around you, well, you're definitely in the right place. We're going to take the blueprint of human capability and break it down into something that actually makes sense.
But right out of the gate, before we even start mapping out this architecture, we have to stop and ask a pretty massive question. What does it really mean to be intelligent? Because, for decades, society had this incredibly narrow, rigid definition of what it meant to be smart. But as our source material reveals, intelligence isn't just a single number on a test. No way. It's an architecture. It's a multi-layered, dynamic structure. And to truly leverage our own minds, we basically have to tear down that old one-dimensional definition and look at the actual building blocks of capability.
So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start by redefining human intelligence, then break down the big three: IQ, EQ, and CQ. After that, we'll explore the broader spectrum of multiple intelligences before finally landing on the reflective action plan, which is where all of this theory actually becomes practice.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Redefining Human Intelligence, an introduction to the architecture.
The primary objective laid out for participants in this module is absolutely crucial. It's all about deeply understanding the definitions and the really distinct differences between various levels of intelligence. Because, let's be honest, we often conflate different types of mental processing. For example, you might think someone who is a literal genius at solving complex math equations, which is standard cognition, is automatically going to be great at managing high-stress interpersonal conflicts. Actually, scratch that. It's more like we just assume smart means smart at everything. But managing conflict is emotional processing. The source material emphasizes that these are entirely distinct mechanisms. To build a proper architecture of action, we first have to separate the different ways our brains function, so we can actually measure and improve them independently.
Okay, let's dive right into this with Section 2, the Big Three: IQ, EQ, and CQ.
The source material makes a really specific point here by separating these acronyms. You simply cannot evaluate human capability through just one lens. Think of these as separate pillars holding up a building. First, you have IQ, your intelligence quotient. That's your cognitive processing, logic, analytical problem solving, the classic stuff. Next, there is EQ, emotional quotient. This is your ability to navigate emotions, build empathy, and manage tricky interpersonal dynamics. And finally, CQ, cultural intelligence. This one is all about your adaptive capabilities, your ability to cross boundaries, understand different cultural contexts, and actually thrive in totally unfamiliar environments. They stand side by side as distinct levels of intelligence that each require their own unique focus. Seeing these contrasted really brings the tension into focus, doesn't it? On one side, you have traditional IQ, which is that classic historical metric of cognitive ability that early workplaces obsessed over. But right alongside it, the module places EQ and QQ as equally valid, differing capability levels. Think about your own life for a second. Which of these intelligences do you kind of lean on the most? Are you relying heavily on traditional cognitive logic to get through the day? Or are you navigating complex situations using your emotional and cultural intelligence? The contrast here shows us that relying on just one pillar creates a really incomplete, unstable architectural picture.
Now, let's zoom out even further for Section 3, Exploring Multiple Intelligences, a Broader Horizon. Now, what's really interesting about this next phase of the source material is that we move completely past those standard acronyms. Our capabilities don't exist in some rigid top-down hierarchy. They exist as a balanced, interconnected spectrum. It's like a giant puzzle. The source highlights specific multiple intelligences. You've got spatial intelligence, which is how we visualize the physical world; linguistic intelligence, our mastery of words and language; and interpersonal intelligence, our capacity to understand the hidden intentions and motivations of others. Every individual piece plays a critical role in making up the whole.
Exploring multiple intelligences means moving completely beyond singular metrics and recognizing this vast spectrum of capabilities. And why does this diverse spectrum matter for us in the real world? Well, because real-world challenges are literally never one-dimensional. A mix of intelligences solves complex problems far better than just raw IQ. Think about it. Launching a successful project requires logical reasoning, sure, but it also demands interpersonal skills to lead a team, and linguistic intelligence to communicate your vision. This comprehensive understanding is the final foundational building block in the module.
It gives us a complete architectural picture of the mind before we pivot to practical application.
And this brilliantly illustrates how all this abstract theory ultimately translates into structured action, bringing us to Section 4, the Reflective Action Plan, or the concept of CSS.
The source material introduces a very specific actionable term here, the Reflective Concept of Action Plan, abbreviated as CSS. This is the ultimate destination where all those previous concepts, IQ, EQ, CQ, and the multiple intelligences, finally converge. It's where the rubber meets the road. So what are the mechanics of CSS? Well, in practice, executing a reflective action plan requires taking a hard look at your individual intelligence profile. You identify which specific cognitive or emotional pillars are your strongest assets, and then you map out a strategy to apply those strengths to your real-world goals. At the exact same time, you create targeted routines to support the areas where you're naturally a bit weaker. You aren't just learning these definitions for the fun of it. You're learning them so you can translate that architectural knowledge into highly structured, totally personalized execution.
Mapping out the logic gives us a super clear step-by-step progression. Step 1, you define those core baseline levels, understanding how your logic, emotion, and adaptability interplay through IQ, EQ, and CQ. Step 2, you expand that understanding to the broader spectrum, recognizing your own unique blend of multiple intelligences, like your spatial or linguistic strengths. And finally, Step 3, armed with that complete map of your capabilities, you execute the reflective action plan, the whole shebang. It's a really compelling narrative arc of self-discovery, where the structure of the module itself is an exercise in building capabilities systematically, right from the ground up.
So what does this all mean for you? The absolutely crucial point here is that this architecture belongs to you. Based on the framework we've explored today, how does your unique intelligence profile shape your personal CSA action plan? Where are your pillars strongest, and where do they need a little reinforcement? Take a minute to really chew on that. Take these blueprints, reflect on your own spectrum of intelligence, and start building your action plan today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, keep building, and I'll catch you next time.